Captain America Brave New World is dropped in theaters, so it's time to stop and rank every Captain America movie from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of all the Captain America movies that you have seen. My list is not the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Now, with each of these movies, I have posted some sort of spoiler review for each of them, so if you want my in-detail thoughts on them, even the obscure ones, I'll have a pinned comment down below with a link to those reviews. And let's get started. In last place, Captain America 1979. Hey, did you even know there were two different made-for-TV Captain America movies released in 1979? Yes, there are two of them. I'm just lumping them together if you want to know which one is better than the other. The second one is better than the first one because the costume looks a little bit better. There's a little bit more action. And of all the actors, Christopher Lee is actually the villain in the second one. But both of these are essentially unwatchable, and they were made by people that did not understand Captain America at all. Essentially, it has the production, music, and vibe of a 1970s action TV show, because that's basically what it is. They are TV movies that they probably hoped that they could turn into a TV show, but they have a very superficial Captain America skin wrapped around them. It's as if the creative team had no idea who Captain America was, had never read a comic book, and they were handed one picture of Captain America and they said, yeah, he's a superhero. His name is Steve Rogers. He used to be in the military and he has some serum that makes him strong. Okay, go. And that's it. That's all they know about Captain America. And from there, they basically get everything else wrong. And they also usually get the costume wrong. The characterization is wrong. The origin story is wrong. It was like during the 1970s when Evel Knievel, this daredevil, was super popular. So Captain America used to be a dirt bike racer. And so he's constantly on a motorcycle doing stunts. He's like using his bike as a glider. I mean, it gets every single thing wrong about Captain America, but most importantly, it's very boring, and the guy playing Captain America is a charisma vacuum. He just has... That guy back there is not a charisma vacuum. I can't even film without being distracted by his charismatic personality, but the guy playing Captain America here just has absolutely nothing interesting. He's low energy and devoid of any charm whatsoever. He's just blonde and athletic looking. That's it. That's why he's Captain America. For the most part, these are so bad, they're boring. There are a couple of things here that are so bad, they are awesome. In particular, when you first see the costume, it's so ugly that it's funny. It's really funny to see this gigantic helmet on a guy's head as the Captain America helmet. And there's one really funny shot of him throwing his shield and it does the boomerang trick, but the way they did that is hilarious. And the other one is most of the like super strength stuff, it's just reversed footage. And so he like runs up to a house or a wall and they pauses. It cuts to a shot of him like going in reverse, flying up from him jumping backwards. There's an even better one where he grabs a motorcycle and he throws it up and it goes and slowly lowers itself down. Really funny stuff, but everything in between is just boring, bland exposition. Dude, I'm kind of shooting a video over here, don't you? Do you mind? You can skip these ones, just watch the highlight reels on YouTube for a good laugh. Number 6, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, technically, this is not a movie, and it does not have Captain America in the title, but you of course know why I'm including it in this list. And to me, this is one of the biggest disappointments in the entire MCU, because this to me felt like an obvious, easy layup. You take two popular side characters that have great chemistry, you do a buddy action show out of it. That is a very safe thing to do, but also very easy to get an easy win, and somehow they botched it. Now, it's well documented that there were complications with the production of this show because of COVID, and they decided to cut a plot line out of the show that did have some sort of pandemic element to it. And perhaps that was the thing that would have fixed this show for me. I don't know, but the show that we have felt like there was no stakes, there was no tension, and they were desperately afraid of allowing the villain to be a villain. And therefore, you have someone blowing up buildings, but you also don't want to call them a terrorist. And they're avoiding having as long as possible, having our main villains do anything that's actually that evil, while at the same time trying to push the idea that Bucky and Sam have to do more and more extreme things to try and stop them. But at its core, I think there was just so many ideas that were so poorly executed, where they're trying to establish the world of Sam's day-to-day life, and he goes to a bank and he can't get a loan because the guy at the bank is confused as to why he didn't have a job while he didn't exist for 5 years. Just like a shockingly dumb sequence. And then we're supposed to believe that Bucky won't work with John Walker because he doesn't think he should have the shield, but he'll break out Zemo and he'll work with Zemo, the guy that brainwashed him and tried to take advantage of him. I don't believe that. I don't buy into that. And it's that sort of lapses in logic, poor writing that just shipwrecked this entire show. And it leads up to Sam literally giving a terrible speech at the end of it.
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up.
It has so much on the nose, lazy social commentary that isn't actually saying anything fresh or new. It's just referencing things, but it just failed to deliver anything compelling while picking the easiest possible genre to have a big win with these two. How do you mess up a buddy show starring these two? Today's video is sponsored by Factor. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. I'm in a busy phase of life. There's always somewhere that my kids need to be. My wife was out of town this weekend. It's tough to eat right. Factor delivers healthy food that's convenient and ready to eat. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I always go Protein Plus or Keto because I'm a high protein kind of guy, but one of the cool things about their chef-prepared meals is they'll include all of these ingredients, but their chefs are able to make them delicious, so I'm suddenly excited for foods I've never been excited for before. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/SeanChandler50off and use code SeanChandler50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code SeanChandler50off at factormeals.com/SeanChandler50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Next up, Captain America Brave New World. This is a frustrating one because there's a lot of things in here that I really enjoyed, and there's a lot of things in here that I don't think worked at all. This film to me was a lot like cinematic leftovers, where it's a reheated version of something better. Now, some things reheat really well. Some leftovers are pretty good, but a lot of other things don't reheat well at all and aren't good as leftovers, and that's what this film felt like. It's not as fresh as it used to be, and it feels like it's trying to copy something that worked over 10 years ago in Winter Soldier, where it's even copying plot points from that film about brainwashing, even the main kind of villain thing in it, where there's a algorithm that's predictive in Winter Soldier. Here, Leader has a super brain that's predictive. It's copying plot points from something better and copying the tone of something better. But at the same time, I feel like this is the MCU film that has been the most cohesive as part of a cinematic universe since probably Endgame, where it's following up plot points, a lot of plot points from Incredible Hulk, maybe to a fault because it feels like Incredible Hulk 2. Of course, it's following up the Captain America movies, the end of Endgame. There's references to Black Widow. Of course, the main plot ties into Eternals. It feels like what happens in other movies matters in this film. And the universe is coming together and working towards something again. Likewise, I really like the chemistry between Sam, Joaquin, and Isaiah. There's some nice banter in there. And then anytime you're seeing a Hulk tear stuff up, that puts a grin on my face. But it's also a movie that feels like it's duct taped together with reshoots. There's so many kind of conflicting reports as to what went down with this movie, but what we do know is that things weren't working, so they delayed the film a good bit in order to do reshoots. According to the official reports, it was 22 days of reshoots. It was only one batch of reshoots, and maybe that's true, but it was done to fix stuff that wasn't working. And I think you watch the movie and you feel that. There's so many sequences with characters standing there explaining the plot rather than the movie telling its story and its plot. And it's just really discouraging that we're in this era where it feels like so many of these MCU products are microwaved in the script writing process and then they're overproduced in the post-production process where they're trying to fix it in post. It doesn't feel like you have this one unified vision for the project coming from writers and directors. It feels like there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think a lot of us are just kind of tired of these overproduced, underdeveloped, mediocre MCU films. And this is just the latest of many that have come over the last 5 years. In fourth, Captain America 1990. Now, real quick, before too many of you freak out over this placement in comparison to the two movies below this on the list, this is widely regarded as one of the worst comic book movies of all time, and people very frequently point to the hyper-edited action sequences. They point to the fact that Captain America, 2 different times in the movies, fakes being sick in order to steal a car.
Would you pull the car over, please? I think I'm going to be sick.
Are you okay? What are you doing? Wait a minute, what are you doing?
And they point to the fact that his ears are part of the mask. They don't have cutouts for his ears.
Are you kidding me?
There's a lot of low-hanging fruit to pick on this movie, and it is from an era of the past where a lot of people don't like this movie at all. Therefore, when you see this movie above 2 other films, by implication, you assume that means I'm saying those other 2 movies are worse than one of the worst movies ever made. Here's the deal. I don't think that at all. I grew up watching Captain America 1990. When I was growing up in the 90s, this was the only Marvel movie that I had until Blade and X-Men came out. This was it. So for me, I've always enjoyed this film. As someone that grew up on low-budget action movies and stuff like that, this movie is a film that was one of those kind of, in many regards, a formative comic book movie for me because I've built my career talking about Marvel movies, and the one I grew up watching is this one right here. And so I've got a soft spot for it. Maybe I'm biased towards it, but I also think a lot of people are overly critical of the film and not giving it credit where credit is due. I actually put out a video talking about all of this. There's a card. I'll try to remember to put it up there. But simply put, I think that this movie gets his origin story right. It gets the Steve Rogers character right as someone that's just trying to do the right thing, fish out of water, a man outside of his own time. Like, it gets all of these elements right, but it was a low-budget action film that had its budget cut at the last minute and then was reworked by producers, and it kind of compromised the vision a little bit. But I think there's a lot more to it than people give it credit for. And to me, it feels like someone was actually passionate about Captain America, and they did the best they had with the resources that they had. and you feel that, or I feel that watching the film, versus some of these other projects where the two below this on the list where I just feel misguided and an MCU with an identity crisis. This feels like Albert Pyun's doing the best he can with what he had access to at the time. I've always enjoyed this film. I actually rewatch it pretty frequently, and I've seen this movie probably exponentially more times than the other Captain America films. Granted, I started watching it in the 90s, so it also had a big head start on the other films on this list. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Captain America movies. And I've got more Captain America content coming in the next few days. And if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on each of these movies, I'll have links somewhere around here, probably a pinned comment down below. In particular, if you want to see my defense of this movie right over here that everyone craps on, I did put out a defense of it just a week or two ago. In third place, Captain America, the First Avenger. And this is my favorite origin story in the entire MCU. I love the Steve Rogers origin of someone that isn't driven really by trauma. They're not driven by revenge or anything like that. It's just a good old-fashioned good person that wants to do the right thing in a genre where almost everyone else needs some external motivation, a lesson to be learned. I love that Steve Rogers, just inherent goodness to him.
This character, the nature of this character and who he is different in that he's very earnest, he's upfront, he's a guy who doesn't really care what people think about him. He's not cynical, there's nothing cynical about this movie. I think that we're ready for just a guy who just wants to do the right thing.
But of MCU films, the thing that makes this one like cut through and stand out quite a bit is that it takes us so far back into the past for 98% of its runtime, where we're during World War II.
We've never done something where we had to recreate an actual time in history. It was great to be a part of a movie that had such an authentic vibe to it.
But it's this highly stylized version of World War II, and I think one of the great choices they made with this film was hiring Joe Johnston to direct this film.
He did a ton of design work on the original Star Wars movies, the X-Wing, the Millennium Falcon, he had a hand in, the storyboards, the action sequences, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, October Sky, The Rocketeer. His career's been leading up to this, to doing a Marvel period movie.
And so they brought someone in that knows how to do adventure, that knows how to do period piece films, in particular during World War II, and is great with designs. So you get one of the MCU films with like just a specific, unique aesthetic, this kind of diesel punk. It's like the vehicular version of Art Deco with these gigantic tanks, these cars that are 20 feet long. Reminds you of like those Superman Fleischer cartoons from the 1940s. Just, it's interesting to look at in a way that very few MCU films are interesting to look at. That's one of the reasons I'm excited for Fantastic Four, because it looks like we're doing this sort of creative art design again. Like they pop. It's stylized World War II, and that's interesting. In particular, where a lot of MCU films post Phase 1 had a certain sameness to them and didn't have a distinct, unique visual style. This one had that unique visual style to it. Chris Evans turns out to be the perfect Captain America. When he was first cast, I was extremely skeptical because I knew him from Not Another Teen Movie and playing Johnny Storm, and I was like, Johnny Storm is not Captain America. I don't know about this. And then he absolutely knocked it out of the park of just capturing this old-fashioned wholesomeness, old-fashioned traditional American values. The first hour of this movie is one of my favorite hours of the MCU when it is that origin story. It's not quite as strong in the back half where it montages through World War II. A lot of the stuff with Red Skull, it just was him delivering exposition in rooms. And so just, there's some things in here that aren't quite as strong that hold it back. And it feels like we have a really great origin story. Then we have to rush the plot to get to the third act and you crash him into the ice and everything like that. But there's so much in this movie that I love. And in particular, because of how there's a homogenous nature to so much MCU of the last 10 years, seeing this film, it cuts through because it feels like there's a true creative artistic vision with this film, and that's what's missing from a lot of the MCU. Our runner-up, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is widely regarded as one of, if not the best films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and for good reason. At its core, it is a very well-crafted film that takes itself seriously while still being highly entertaining. It has very interesting thematic ideas interwoven all throughout the entire film, and it's just a great use of the Captain America character. Whereas for a lot of people, not me, kind of a dull character because he is such a wholesome, good-natured person, they take him, this character that is very black and white, very trusting of authority figures, and place him in a world where maybe you shouldn't trust authority figures. Maybe the establishment isn't something worth fighting for anymore.
So we began pitching the sort of 70s deconstructionist version of what Captain America is, a character who just wants to serve his country. How do you put that character in a place where he has to basically do the opposite of that?
And suddenly a character who can be very vanilla becomes very compelling because of the context where you have placed him.
For as long as I can remember, I just wanted to do what was right. I guess I'm not quite sure what that is anymore.
Likewise, one of the things people just love about this film is that it feels like the most grounded of the MCU films. It has all the fantastical elements, the sci-fi, the brainwashing, but it's treated in a much more anchored fashion, which is something the Russos set out to do from the very beginning.
Part of our creative process has always been, finding like incongruous elements to put together and see what, and figure out a way to marry them and see what that does. And there was just something irresistible about taking a cinematic style that's associated with realism and naturalism and, shooting an unreal superhero world with that style.
In other interviews, they've talked about how they tried to use as little green screen as possible, capture as much in frame as is possible. That's one of the things that Anthony Mackie really enjoyed working on in making of this film, that it was very practical, and you feel that watching this movie. It's just more tactile, it's more visceral in all of the action that takes place. And then just on a story level, it feels much like a much tighter constructed film. The Russos actually did an interview with the Honest Trailer people.
There's a story floating around that you had talked about honest trailer proofing your movie.
We did. It was a big phrase that I would use when we were working on the script, and we would go through the script together, and if there were any sort of lapse in logic, it was always my phrase, like, I'm not going to let Honest Trailers beat us up over this lapse in logic, so we're going to fix this story point.
But as much as it is this big spectacle action film about the implosion of S.H.I.E.L.D., the fall of Hydra, and death ships in the sky, at its core, it's a character piece about Steve and Bucky and Steve's absolute loyalty to his friend, and how Steve's nobility and character cause other people to be loyal to him in the process and help him on this mission, even if they just met him, kind of like Sam. And so, as big as it is, it's also one of the most personal and character-based of the MCU films. For that reason, it is one of the most beloved and celebrated MCU films. I've never had it at the absolute top for me, though I do think it is a great film. Just a couple things I don't resonate with quite as much, like the Zola exposition scene feels a little bit like we're going off into a different movie in the middle of the film in order to explain the plot. And then the final mission of Hydra is to put a ship in the sky and shoot people that they don't like. For a movie that's so grounded and smart, that feels very silly. But like I said, it's a great film, and the reason that it's not at the top is just because there's other movies that I resonate more with. But coming in at number 1, Captain America Civil War. For me, this movie is essentially the epitome of what was so great about the MCU in its prime. It is very much a Captain America film. It is told from his perspective. He is the one with this arc with big revelations made about him. It's all about his loyalty to Bucky and his efforts to save his friend and redeem his friend Bucky. But it's also a movie that is following up everything that has happened in the MCU up to this point in time. What happened in all of these other films matters in this film.
And there's an amazing storyline from the comics called Civil War. There is an event that occurs that causes the governments of the world to say, we need to have oversight over these heroes now. And in our story, that oversight is basically because of the collateral damage caused during all of the action sequences of the other films.
What I love about this film is that it is following up all of these previous films, and where we've been following all of these different characters, we understand the journey that they've been on. We understand what they value and their perspective. So when the Sokovia Accords are put in front of them, you understand why the government would want to do that, and you understand why each of these characters would fall on each side.
It was very important to us to approach that sequence from every single character's point of view. Everybody had their reason for being there. Everyone had a crisis to deal with that had an emotional component for them.
Of this civil war, even sometimes when they fall on kind of unlikely sides.
You know, if you were to just say on a surface level, well, who would agree to take orders from an authority figure and who wouldn't? Well, you'd think Captain America, who was a soldier in his own right, would agree to it. And Tony Stark, who's gone in front of the U.S. Senate and said, I'm not playing along with you guys, would not want to do it. So it's very interesting to see them very naturally and realistically grow to the opposite viewpoints.
But it's not just about the Sokovia Accords. They also make it a deeply personal story about Steve's loyalty to Bucky and Tony's trauma due to his parents' death and his inherent impulsive nature. So it has big spectacle. It is about the MCU as a whole, but it's also about the breakdown of friendships. It's about loyalty. It's about how far would you go. It's about all of these things at the exact same time.
How do we put them on opposite sides, and then how do we create a crisis moment for the two of them around this very personal revelation?
And that, to me, is why this is the epitome of the MCU. That it can follow up so many different things, be so big, but be so personal, have dire consequences for the future because the Avengers broke up. And that led to Thanos' victory. But at the same time, in this movie, it seamlessly introduces Black Panther as well as Spider-Man while having this really fun airport sequence that also has big consequences from the airport sequence. That to me is what I love about the MCU. And because the conflict was actually earned through years of storytelling and character development.
To see them, because we know their personalities so well, we know how they work together, and we know that they have some issues with each other. They're very, very different people. And how would they react if they were faced with an issue that they just disagreed about?
It's led to a scenario where the fans of Marvel and fans of this movie have been split as to who was right. Like, right down the middle. We've been debating still. Was Steve right or was Tony right? What should have happened? How could they have resolved it? That, when you're able to create that scenario where the audience is actually debating the conflict at the center of your movie, when it's following so many films and setting up so many different films, you have done something special. That, to me, is why this is one of the absolute best Marvel Cinematic Universe films, but it is a Captain America movie about Steve and his loyalty to Bucky. So it is also, in my mind, the best Captain America movie, so it comes in at number 1. You can check out some of my other rankings right over there. You can check out my individual reviews for the different Captain America movies down below in that pinned comment. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.